Have you ever wondered why the Skyline R34 GT-R became the most obsessed over Japanese car in history? You probably think it's because of Fast and Furious, Gran Turismo, or those legendary Nürburgring lap times. But if you thought you knew everything about this twin-turbo monster, you're in for a shock. In the next few minutes, you'll discover 20 weird facts about the R34 GT-R that even die-hard Skyline fanatics don't know. And stick around for the end, because we've saved a surprise fact about these cars that'll make you question everything you thought you knew about Japanese performance engineering. BNR34 chassis code. Here's something that separates the real GT-R nerds from the wannabes. The GT-R's internal chassis code is BNR34, while regular R34 Skylines use completely different codes like ER, EN, or ECR34. This isn't just random letters and numbers either. That B stands for the RB26D ETT engine, N indicates all-wheel drive, and R means it's a coupe. The regular Skylines, they get E for their smaller engines, and some have C for the RB25 motor. This coding system goes way back to the original Hakosuka GT-Rs of the early 70s. What makes this weird is that Nissan could have simplified things and just called them all R34s, but they deliberately kept this complex system to maintain the GT-R's separate identity. It's like they were saying, this isn't just another trim level, it's a completely different animal. And here's the kicker. Insurance companies in Japan actually use these codes to determine rates, which is why GT-R insurance was astronomical compared to a regular Skyline with the same body. The B&R designation basically told insurers this owner is probably going to drive like a maniac. A-TESSA ETS Pro magic. The all-wheel drive system in the R34 GT-R is so advanced that engineers from other companies still study it today. A-TESSA ETS Pro uses yaw sensors, G sensors, and an active rear-limited slip differential to constantly shuffle torque between the wheels. But here's the weird part. The system is actually rear-wheel drive most of the time. Under normal driving, 100% of the power goes to the rear wheels. It's only when the computer detects slip, aggressive cornering, or hard acceleration that it starts sending power forward up to 50% to the front wheels. The system makes adjustments 100 times per second, faster than any human could ever react. What's really bizarre is that Nissan developed this system by studying rally cars, but then made it work better on tarmac than most rally systems work on gravel. The computer even has different maps for wet and dry conditions, and it can detect wheel spin before it actually happens by monitoring throttle position and comparing it to actual wheel speed. Some tuners have cracked the code and found that the system has hidden capabilities Nissan never activated, including a full front-wheel drive mode that was left dormant in the programming. Super HICAS, rear steer. Four-wheel steering sounds like something from a concept car, but Nissan put it in every R34 GT-R. The Super HICAS system uses an electric actuator to turn the rear wheels up to 1 degree in either direction. That might not sound like much, but at speed, it completely transforms how the car handles. Below 50 miles per hour, the rear wheels turn opposite to the fronts, making the car rotate faster in tight corners. Above that speed, they turn the same direction as the fronts for stability during lane changes. The weird thing is, most owners don't even know their car has this system until something breaks. The actuator is hidden under the car, and when it works properly, you just feel like you're an amazing driver. But here's where it gets really strange. Nissan programmed the system to have different personalities depending on driving style. Drive smoothly, and it barely activates. Drive aggressively, and it becomes hyperactive, constantly adjusting to help you maintain control. The system is so complex that when it fails, many shops just delete it entirely rather than try to fix it. Some racing teams discovered that in certain situations, the HICAS system could actually make the car faster than a manual steering rack, which goes against everything racers believed about keeping things simple. Getrag 6 speed only. Every single R34 GT-R left the factory with the same transmission, a Getrag 2, 3, 3, 6 speed manual. No automatics, no 5 speeds, no options. This German-engineered gearbox was specifically built to handle the RB26's torque and the stress of all-wheel drive launches. What's weird is that Nissan could have saved money using their own transmissions, but they knew nothing in their parts. Bin could survive what GT-R owners would do to these cars. The Getrag box has incredibly close ratios, so close that shifting from 5th to 6th at highway speeds barely drops the RPMs. This was intentional, keeping the engine in its power band during high-speed runs. The transmission uses a pull-type clutch instead of the more common push-type, which gives it a unique feel that takes some getting used to. Here's something most people don't know. The transmission has a hidden strength rating that's way higher than what Nissan claimed. Internal Getrag documents show it was tested to handle over 600 pound-feet of torque, nearly double the stock engine's output. This is why tuned GT-Rs making 800 horsepower can still use the stock transmission with just an upgraded clutch. The shift pattern is also reversed from what Americans expect, with first gear being toward you and to the left, which has caught out more than a few drivers at stoplights. Live data on the dash. The R34 GT-R's multifunction display was like having a PlayStation in your dashboard in 1999. This 5.8-inch LCD screen shows boost pressure, oil temperature, water temperature, battery voltage, and even injector duty cycle in real time. But the really weird stuff is in the hidden menus. Hold the right buttons during startup and you can access diagnostic modes that show throttle, position percentages, individual wheel speeds, and even turbo wastegate duty cycles. The display has 7 different screens you can cycle through, including one that shows a graph of your recent acceleration g-forces. What's bizarre is that this system was more advanced than what many professional race teams were using at the time. The computer stores peak values, so you can see the highest boost pressure or temperature your engine has hit. There's even a function that shows how many times you've hit the rev limiter, Nissan's way of keeping track of abuse. Some Japanese tuners figured out how to hack the display to show additional parameters like air-fuel ratios and exhaust gas temperatures. The strangest feature? A maintenance reminder that counts down in kilometers but can't be reset without a special tool, forcing owners to visit dealers or figure out the secret button combination that involves holding 3 buttons while turning the ignition on and off 3 times. NISMO MFD upgrade. Nissan's motorsport division offered a factory upgrade that turned the already impressive multifunction display into something from a spaceship. This NISMO kit added extra sensor inputs and new software that included lap timing, sector splits, and even predictive lap times based on your current pace. The weird part is that this wasn't some aftermarket hack. It was a genuine Nissan option that came with a warranty. The upgrade required drilling holes in your pristine GT-R to install additional sensors, which seems crazy for a factory option. It could log data to a memory card, letting you download your track sessions to a computer for analysis. The system was so advanced it could tell you exactly where you were losing time on track by comparing your current lap to your best lap in real time. What's really strange is that Nissan sold very few of these kits, making cars equipped with them incredibly rare today. The software had some quirky features too, like a drift angle display that showed how sideways you were in degrees, and a competition mode that disabled certain street-friendly features. Some owners discovered that the NISMO software had code for features that were never activated, including launch control and individual cylinder fuel trim displays. The kit costs more than a decent used car, which explains why most owners just stuck with the standard display. Ceramic turbo wheels. The twin turbochargers on the RB26D ETT use ceramic turbine wheels instead of traditional steel ones. These ceramic wheels are about 40% lighter than steel, which means they spool up incredibly fast, full boost by 3,000 RPM. But here's the weird part. These same ceramic turbines that give the GT-R its legendary response are also its biggest weakness. Push them past 18 pounds of boost and they can literally explode, sending ceramic shrapnel through your engine. Nissan knew this but kept them anyway because the response was worth the risk for a street car. The ceramic material is so sensitive that even a momentary overboost spike from a boost controller malfunction can crack them. What's really bizarre is that these turbos were manufactured by Hitachi using technology borrowed from the space program. The ceramic compound is similar to what's used on spacecraft heat shields. Each turbo is individually balanced and matched as a pair, with serial numbers that have to stay together. If you replace just one turbo, the car runs terribly until you replace both. Tuners discovered that the ceramic wheels have a unique sound, a high-pitched whistle that steel turbos don't make. This became a way to identify unmolested cars at meets. The strangest fact: Nissan continued using these fragile turbos even after multiple companies offered to supply stronger steel versions at a lower cost. Gentleman's power cap. The R34 GT-R was officially rated at 280 PS, which equals about 276 horsepower. This wasn't because Nissan couldn't make more power, it was because of a bizarre gentleman's agreement between Japanese manufacturers to not advertise more than 280 PS. But here's where it gets weird. Everyone was lying. Dyno tests consistently showed stock GT-Rs making over 300 PS at the wheels, which means the engine was actually producing around 330 PS. Nissan's engineers basically programmed the ECU to make sure the car would only show 280 PS on government test equipment while making significantly more in real-world driving. The boost controller has a special mode that reduces power when it detects the specific RPM and load conditions used in official testing. What's really strange is that this agreement only applied to advertised power. There was nothing stopping manufacturers from making cars that actually produced more. Some GT-Rs were even stronger than others due to manufacturing tolerances, with differences of 20 to 30 horsepower between supposedly identical cars. The agreement finally ended in 2005, but by then it had become such a part of Japanese car culture that people still refer to high-performance Japanese cars as 280 PS machines as a joke. Shorter, stiffer than R33. Nissan made the R34 55mm shorter in wheelbase than the R33 it replaced. That's only about 2 inches, but it completely changed the car's character. The shorter wheelbase made the car more nervous and darty, which is exactly what Nissan wanted. They also increased chassis stiffness by 40% using additional spot welds and thicker steel in key areas. But here's the weird part. They made these changes based on complaints that the R33 was too stable. Customers actually wanted a car that was harder to drive because it felt more exciting. The body shell uses different grades of steel in different areas, with ultra-high strength steel in the A-pillars and regular steel in the crumple zones. This selective use of materials was incredibly advanced for 1999. The chassis has drain holes in specific locations that were positioned based on supercomputer simulations of water flow. What's bizarre is that these holes are in different places on left-hand drive and right-hand drive cars because water flows differently depending on which side of the road you're on. The rear suspension mounting points were reinforced with additional bracing that's hidden under the trunk carpet. Many owners don't even know it's there until they remove the interior. The strangest modification was the addition of tiny rubber bumpers on the chassis rails that prevent the exhaust from hitting during extreme suspension compression. Carbon rear. Diffuser V-Spec models came with a functional carbon fiber rear diffuser that actually produced downforce. This wasn't just for show. Nissan developed it using data from their JGTC race cars. The diffuser channels air from under the car to create a low-pressure area that sucks the car down to the road. At 100 miles per hour, it generates about 30 pounds of downforce. The weird thing is that the diffuser only works properly with the factory exhaust system. Change to an aftermarket exhaust and the aerodynamics get disrupted, actually making the car less stable at high speed. The carbon fiber used is pre-impregnated aerospace-grade material that costs more per pound than silver. Each diffuser takes 8 hours to manufacture due to the complex curves and mounting points. What's really strange is that Nissan hid ventilation ducts inside the diffuser that cool the differential. These ducts are so well integrated that most people think they're just for show. The diffuser has drain holes positioned to prevent water accumulation, but they're sized specifically to create a whistle at certain speeds. Nissan's engineers thought this would remind drivers they had the special V-Spec model. Some owners discovered that the diffuser mounting points are strong enough to use as recovery hooks, though Nissan definitely didn't intend this. The carbon weave pattern is oriented specifically to handle the aerodynamic loads, making each diffuser a tiny piece of engineering art. V-Spec means victory. The V in V-Spec stands for victory, celebrating Nissan's racing successes. But the V-Spec isn't just a sticker package, it includes serious hardware upgrades. The A-TESSA all-wheel drive system gets more aggressive programming that sends power forward faster. The rear differential gets an oil cooler to handle track abuse. The suspension uses stiffer springs and different damper valoring. But here's what's weird. Nissan made some V-Spec cars heavier than base models by adding all this equipment. The diff cooler alone adds 15 pounds. They also added extra sound deadening in specific areas to reduce wind noise at high speed, which seems counterintuitive for a track-focused model. The V-Spec cars got special brake pads that needed a specific bedding and procedure. Skip this process and the brakes would never work properly, leading many owners to think their cars were defective. What's really bizarre is that V-Spec models have a hidden track mode in the ABS system that's activated by a specific sequence of brake pedal pumps with the ignition on. This changes the ABS intervention threshold and allows more wheel slip before activation. The V-Spec badge itself is made from a special aluminum alloy that changes color slightly with temperature. On hot days, it looks more silver, while on cold days, it has a blue tint. Some Japanese owners claim this was intentional, but Nissan has never confirmed it. V-Spec II. Carbon hood. The 2001 V-Spec II introduced a vented carbon fiber hood with an NACA duct that actually works. This hood weighs 22 pounds less than the standard aluminum piece and channels air directly to the intake system. The NACA duct design comes from aviation and creates airflow without adding drag. But here's the weird part. The hood is so effective at cooling that it can actually overcool the engine in cold weather. Some owners in northern Japan had to partially block the vent in winter to maintain proper operating temperature. The carbon fiber layup is different on the underside than the top, with extra layers around the mounting points and hinges. Each hood takes 40 hours to manufacture due to the autoclave curing process. What's strange is that Nissan used clear coat that's specifically formulated to block UV rays, but only on the top surface. The underside uses regular clear coat, which is why some hoods show yellowing from below while still looking perfect from above. The hood has tiny drainage channels molded into it that direct water away from the engine. These channels are so subtle that most people don't notice them, but they prevent water from pooling on top of the engine during rain. The NACA duct has a mesh screen that's not for keeping debris out. It's actually there to straighten airflow and reduce turbulence. Remove this screen and the hood becomes less effective at cooling. Comfort-leaning M-Spec. The M-Spec was Nissan's attempt to make a luxury GT-R, and it's full of weird contradictions. It has leather seats with heating elements, but they're still the same aggressive bucket shape as the cloth ones. The special ripple control shock absorbers have electronic damping adjustment, but only for compression. Rebound is fixed. The leather-wrapped steering wheel is actually thicker than the standard wheel, which hardcore drivers hate, but long-distance cruisers love. What's really weird is that M-Spec cars are actually faster in certain conditions than V-Specs. The softer suspension allows the tires to maintain better contact on bumpy roads, and the heated seats keep drivers more relaxed and focused during long sessions. The M-Spec got special sound insulation that adds 35 pounds but reduces interior noise by 6 decibels. This insulation is strategically placed based on acoustic modeling with different thicknesses in different areas. The strangest feature is the power folding mirrors, which sounds normal until you realize they fold at different speeds. The driver's side folds slower to prevent it from hitting the window if it's partially down. M-Spec cars have a unique ECU map that slightly reduces throttle response in first and second gear to make the car easier to drive in traffic. This comfort map can be overridden by flooring the throttle, which switches to the normal, aggressive map until you lift off completely. Newer editions, total 1003. The final year newer editions are the holy grail of R34 GT-Rs, with exactly 1003 produced, 718 V-Spec II Nurs, and 285 M-Spec Nurs. These cars got the N1 spec engine with reinforced internals and those famous gold cam covers. But the weird stuff is in the details nobody talks about. The N1 engine uses different piston rings that need a 1,000-mile break-in period where you can't exceed 4,000 RPM. Many owners didn't know this and damaged their engines immediately. The gold cam covers aren't just painted, they use a special anodizing process that costs $300 per cover. Each engine was hand-assembled by a single technician who signed their work with a plaque. What's bizarre is that these engines actually make less power than standard engines when cold. The tighter tolerances mean they need to be fully warmed up to run properly. The newer edition cars have a hidden serial number etched into the firewall that doesn't match the chassis number. This was Nissan's way of tracking which engines went into which cars, but it's caused confusion for collectors trying to verify authenticity. Some newer engines have slightly different compression ratios due to manufacturing variations in the special pistons. Nissan considered this acceptable as long as all 6 cylinders matched within half a point. The strangest fact? The gold color of the cam covers was chosen because it matched the champagne Nissan executives were drinking when they approved the special edition. Paint code icons. Bayside blue, paint code TV2 became the definitive R34 GT-R color. But here's what's weird. This color was originally developed for a completely different car and was considered a mistake. The paint has special metallic flakes that change appearance dramatically in different light. In direct sun, it looks almost purple, while in shade, it appears deep blue. The paint process requires 6 separate coats, including a special tinted clear coat. Each Bayside blue car uses exactly 4.7 liters of paint, and Nissan mixed batches specifically for GT-R production. Millennium Jade, code JW0, was exclusive to newer editions and has an even stranger story. The color was created by accidentally mixing 2 other colors, and Nissan executives loved the mistake so much they made it official. This paint is temperature sensitive and actually changes shade slightly as the body panels heat up. What's really bizarre is that touch-up paint never matches properly because the factory process can't be replicated in small batches. White GT-Rs code QM1 use a 3-stage pearl process that makes them the most expensive color to repair. The pearl particles are oriented by electromagnetic fields during spraying, creating depth that normal white paint can't achieve. Some colors were market-specific, certain shades were only available in specific regions of Japan based on local dealer preferences. 180 km/h limiter. Every Japanese market R34 GT-R was limited to 180 km/h, which is about 112 miles per hour. This wasn't a Nissan decision, it was Japanese law. But the implementation is fascinating. The limiter doesn't cut fuel or spark like normal speed limiters. Instead, it gradually reduces throttle opening as you approach the limit, making the car feel like it's running out of power. This was done to prevent the sudden jerk that normal limiters cause. The weird part is that the limiter is GPS-based in some cars. Late production models could detect when they were at racetracks and automatically disable the limiter. The system used a database of Japanese track locations stored in the ECU. What's really strange is that the limiter has multiple backup systems. Even if you defeat the primary limiter, there are secondary and tertiary systems that kick in. Tuners eventually figured out all 3, but it took years to crack the code completely. The limiter also affects the speedometer, which stops at 180 even if you're actually going faster. This has led to many GT-R owners not knowing their true top speed. Some prefectures in Japan had different enforcement, and Nissan allegedly made the limiter easier to defeat on cars sold in areas with less strict police. The strangest fact, the limiter code takes up more space in the ECU than the actual engine management software. Hand-built RB26. Every RB26D ETT engine was assembled by hand in Yokohama by specially trained technicians. Each builder went through a 6-month training program before they were allowed to touch a customer engine. The engines were built in a clean room environment with positive air pressure to keep dust out. But here's what's weird. Each technician had their own torque wrench calibrated specifically to their hand strength. Nissan found that different people apply torque differently even with the same wrench, so they compensated by giving each builder custom tools. The bearing clearances were hand-selected based on measurements of each specific block and crankshaft. No 2 engines have exactly the same clearances. What's bizarre is that builders were required to wash their hands with a specific soap that wouldn't leave residue on engine parts. They even had rules about what deodorant workers could wear because certain chemicals could contaminate the assembly. Each engine takes 8 hours to assemble, but builders were only allowed to work on 1 engine per day to maintain focus. The engines were hot tested for 30 minutes before installation, running through various RPM and load conditions. About 3% failed this test and had to be completely rebuilt. The strangest requirement, builders had to listen to classical music during assembly because Nissan studies showed it improved concentration and reduced mistakes. Z-Tune came later. The Z-Tune is often confused with factory R34s, but these cars were built by NISMO years after production ended. They bought used R34 V-Specs and stripped them to bare shells and rebuilt them into 500 horsepower monsters. Only 19 were made because that's all the suitable donor cars Nismo could find. The shells were seam welded for additional stiffness, adding over 300 new weld points. The RB26 was bored out to 2.8 liters, becoming the RB28 with forged internals and massive turbos. But the weird stuff is in the details. Each car took 6 months to build, with 3 months just for paint and bodywork. The special silver Z-Tune color has actual silver particles in it, making it the most expensive paint Nissan ever used. What's bizarre is that Nismo had to crash test one of these rare cars to prove they were still road legal after all the modifications. That crashed car was supposedly repaired and sold, though Nismo won't confirm which serial number it was. The Z-Tune hood is completely different from any factory hood, with vents designed using Formula 1 aerodynamics. The front bumper extends so far forward that the cars can't use standard shipping containers. Some Z-Tune parts were pre-production pieces for the R35 GT-R that Nismo adapted to fit the R34. The strangest fact, the Z-Tune's Vayu end plates were hand-stamped using the same machine Nissan used in the 1960s for the original Skyline. US legal unicorns. A handful of R34 GT-Rs were legally imported to the US before the 25-year rule, and their stories are wild. MotorX famously federalized a small number by crash testing cars and developing DOT-compliant modifications. But what's weird is that each car was slightly different depending on when it was converted. Early conversions have different door reinforcements than later ones. Some have airbags from other Nissan models grafted in, while others use custom-made units. The EPA compliance was achieved by adding extra catalytic converters and reprogramming the ECU, but each tuner had their own method. What's really bizarre is that some cars were imported as show or display vehicles, which allows limited driving of historically significant cars. Owners had to prove to the government that the R34 GT-R was culturally important enough to deserve an exemption. The documentation for these cars runs hundreds of pages. Some military personnel brought cars back under special exemptions, but these cars can never be sold to civilians. The strangest loophole was racing exemptions. Some GT-Rs were imported as race cars, converted to race spec, then slowly converted back to street cars over time. Now that 25 years have passed since 1999, early R34s are becoming legal. But prices have gone absolutely insane due to decades of pent-up demand. Last Skyline GT-R, the R34 was the final GT-R to wear the Skyline name. From 1999 to 2002, these cars marked the end of an era that started with the original Hakosuka in 1969. When the R35 GT-R arrived in 2007, it dropped the Skyline name entirely, becoming just the Nissan GT-R. This wasn't just marketing, but it represented a complete philosophy change. The R34 was the last GT-R built as a modified version of a regular car. It shared its platform with sedan and wagon Skylines that normal people drove to work. The R35 was designed as a supercar from the ground up with no humble siblings. What's weird is that Nissan considered calling the R34 something else entirely. Internal documents show names like Fairlady Z GT-R and even Maxima GT-R were considered. The decision to keep the Skyline name was made at the last minute by executives who felt the heritage was too important to abandon. The R34 production line was shared with regular Skylines, while the R35 gets its own dedicated factory. Workers who built the last R34 GT-Rs signed the inside of the trunk lid on many cars, knowing they were witnessing history. Some of these signatures have become valuable authentication tools for collectors. The truly strange part? Nissan kept the R34 production tooling in storage for years, supposedly in case they ever wanted to build more. It was finally scrapped in 2010 when the warehouse space was needed for R35 parts. That's all for today, folks. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button so you don't miss the next one. See you there.